So finally, we are starting our first panel discussion, and I would like to invite Sabahat on stage to introduce your panelists as well, and I guess we are going to have a good discussion on inclusion.
Thank you so much, Ikra. Starting a panel in the start becomes quite challenging, although, but I'm sure that we are all eager to hear our esteemed panelists. I'd like to invite my 3 panelists here, and the 4th panelist will join as soon as they arrive. So without further ado, I may call upon my panelists, Ms. Maleeha Bangash, Mr. Ishaq, Shahzad Ishaq, and Ms. Saira. Ms. Maleeha is advisor in the digital transformation and financial expert. Shahzad Ishaq Saab is CDO, Chief Digital Officer in MCB, and Ms. Saira Faisal is Country Head Digital Transformation, GSMA. It's okay. So thank you so much. Our topic today is very interesting. It's closing the digital gap through financial inclusion. But before we go deep dive into the topic, I would be interested in starting from a footing so that we can take all of our audience on board as well. And I start with you, Maleeha, that if you can help us understand the boundaries and the scope of digital divide, and what do we really mean by the financial inclusion of these people?
Okay, thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Great to be here. Wow, nice, fresh faces this morning. I think it's a very critical question that we all ask. I think we see a lot of young people in the audience, and I have to say that digital inclusion is directly related to financial inclusion. So just to give you a bit of context, I am a financial sector expert and I am a digital financial inclusion expert. I work in the East Asia Pacific markets for the digital transformation of banks and for actually digital banking. And so digital financial inclusion is very critical because it provides access to finance. If we talk about the World Economic Forum, they have recently come up with this concept of digital inclusion for the unbanked and unserved. And the concept is that for financial inclusion, health care, and educational inclusion, the people who are not on the digital platforms are actually the most susceptible, and they are not getting any inclusion in these 3 aspects. So there are about 2.6 billion people in the world who do not have access to digital platform, who are not on the internet. And we ourselves know that in Pakistan itself, there is a huge number of people, about 100 million people according to World Bank and IFC, where I work also, who in Pakistan who are totally unbanked and have no access to financial services. So the World Economic Forum has started what we call the Edison project, which is getting people, about 1 billion people in the world by 2025 will have access to internet and digital platforms. Now let's step back a little bit and let's talk about what do we mean by a digital? Why is it important? So mostly when we talk about financial products, what are we thinking of? Any ideas? We're thinking of payments, right? Easy Paisa, etc. We're thinking of credit, loans. We all need loans at some point in time. We're thinking of maybe investments, insurance, right? So things like that. So all these solutions are only accessible to some people who are not, who are financially literate, and they also are aware and they are eligible for these products. So now what is financial inclusion doing in terms of digital enablement? Digital enablement is that when you get onto a digital platform, you have a digital footprint or a digital personality, right? So how many of us are on digital platforms like Instagram or at least I am, yeah, so we're all on these. And some of us, when we feel hungry, we want to do Food Panda, we want to use Uber or Careem. So we do our payments through what we call embedded finance. Embedded finance is you're buying something off Instagram or an e-commerce platform, and you're actually paying through those platforms. So what you are creating is a transaction and a digital identity and a history of what you are, your transactional history. So banks and financial services internationally and also now in Pakistan are using this history and creating a profile, a credit profile of the various users on the digital platforms, and then using this to actually extend credit. And the best way to do it is, of course, also I believe digitally, because it's lower cost, it's easier to access, and it is very much something that is creating a low cost to income ratio for a lot of banks. So financial institutions want to serve or need to serve the SMEs, the youth, women, the disenfranchised, like people with specially abled or disabilities, specially abled people, people who are minorities or perhaps not literate enough. However, through digital means, even this financial literacy can be provided to people who don't know much about financial services. So that is an overview. Specifically, I will talk about what China is doing in WeBank in Singapore, because I work in the East Asia market, and then we'll talk about, I'm sure our experts will talk about Pakistan also. Now typically, how many of us have heard of WeChat, this platform? Yeah? Okay, yeah, WeChat. So it's just like your, it's a WhatsApp kind of a messaging platform, but also it provides options. It's kind of an ecosystem platform, provides, you know, you can buy things off of it, you can message, you can do, you know, share content. So what we talk about user generated content, which creates a lot of, you know, you can find out more about the users, right? So what WeBank did was they had this platform called WeChat, and so from that they created profiles of their users, and then they created through AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning and deep learning, which we use a lot in hyper-personalization. They actually hyper-personalized and created credit profiles of these various users, and they knew, for instance, they knew that Maleeha is going to be traveling to Pakistan, and she's going to be living here, and she has some needs, and she's in a stage where her son needs to go to school and study, so there's educational loans. Does she want to buy a house? Okay, there's a mortgage loan. Is she in the stage of life where she's traveling? Okay, can we offer forex services, insurance, health? So these ecosystem products, which we call hyper-personalization products, were offered. DBS Bank in Singapore is doing the same. They have a digibanking platform, which they launched in 2016, before COVID. And through open API systems, they are creating hyper-personalized products through which go through the life cycle of any user. So we are not talking just about you know, a woman or so for youth, education is important. So loans for your education, for your higher studies, you know, scholarships, grants, etc., which you can access, which you can, or specifically student loans. So through ecosystem, you are actually, similarly women-led businesses, they have specific needs. So all of this is being done through platforms, through mining data, and through a digital ecosystem, shall I say. So when we talk of financial inclusion, or let's say any form of inclusion, whether it's healthcare or it's education, we have to think of digital inclusion. Yeah. So the digital divide is basically what is preventing people from getting financial access. So with that, I'll just, you know,
Thank you,
wrap it
Maleeha.
up.
That's
Thank
quite
you so much.
elaborative, and I think everyone is now seeing the topic clearly, that it is not only about talking about how women can be included, and whenever we talk about financial inclusion, we only talk about women, and then we all think about that let's make products for women. But yes, in Pakistan context, the digital divide is about all those people who are unbanked, and the larger population of that is women. So that is why the natural recipient of the main attention become women. I come to you, Saira, and we know that globally the attention had been on Pakistan for the financial and digital side and the gap that we have, and a lot of data had been and reports had been produced as well. At GSMA level, what do you think the global community is seeing Pakistan's challenges? What are those challenges of financial inclusion? And how policies specifically can be designed which supports the idea of including the unbanked population?
Thank you, Sabahat, and Assalamu alaikum everyone. I'm glad to be part of this panel. Although we are talking about digital and financial inclusion generally, but gender is something which is very close to my heart. And like Sabahat mentioned that in Pakistan, our digital divide is mostly attributed as digital gender divide, because women are disproportionately affected by it. Now, when we talk about digital and financial inclusion, I mean digital inclusion is a prerequisite to financial inclusion, that's how I see it. And of course, when we talk about a digital divide and gender gap, it's been recognized by the Secretary General, UN Secretary General, by the Commission on the Status of Women, G20 leaders. In fact, they passed a declaration last year in India to halve the digital gender divide by 2030. So from a GSMA perspective, just a bit of insight into the data, because GSMA conducts a lot of research and survey in Pakistan. So I would take digital from the context of mobile ownership. Reason being that our data, GSMA's data shows that 86% of the unconnected women access internet via mobile. So in that context, you know, we'll talk about mobile ownership and the use of mobile internet as being digitally included. So women in Pakistan are 53% less likely than men to own a smartphone, and then 38% less likely than men to use mobile internet. So, pehle, you know, ownership of a smartphone is a huge gap, and then using mobile internet. So, and then through our research and data, we identified that although men are also affected by these barriers that I'll talk about now, but women are disproportionately because of their socioeconomic status as well. So in Pakistan, GSM identified that the top 3 barriers for digital inclusion of women is around knowledge and digital skills. The second one is family approval, the socioeconomic norms, and the third one is handset affordability. So in that regard, I mean, there are others as well, relevance of social media or mobile to you or going online to you, and then climate and all this comes into effect as well. But if we talk about these 3, so from the knowledge skills and digital skills perspective, GSMA has been actively working in Pakistan and around as well in the region and globally. We're working with policymakers and the government where they can enable digital skills educational programs, more specifically for women in the rural areas through partnerships, public-private partnerships. And yet again, focus on mobile, because that's what the data shows. That's how the internet is accessed. The second one is when we talk about the second barrier of social norms. So we are actually also in this regard working with the government and certain public-private partnerships in Pakistan, where we are creating mass awareness campaigns. The recent one is we'll start working with the National Commission on the Status of Women and PTA on creating this mass awareness campaigns, identifying areas where it's mostly needed to build this awareness about how important it is. And the third one, of course, is handset affordability.
Yeah.
So we know that in Pakistan, having the basic smartphone price, if I may say, starts from 20K onwards. And that is a feature phone, right?
Yeah.
If you talk about a smart feature phone, that is 20 plus. So if we talk about the segment that we're talking about, there is a huge affordability barrier which does not allow them. And this, let me also tell you that this gender gap became worse during COVID. Reason being that women, of course, since they run the household and all, the women who were already even owning smartphones had to sell it to support the monthly expenses, because COVID had an impact on all of us in terms of survival. So in that regard, that digital divide had widened. Now, the 2023 study that GSMA conducted, and we have a new report coming up on the 15th of May, which has stats on Pakistan as well, highlights that this is now again narrowing down and going back to where we were in 2020. So still a lot of work needs to be done. Handset affordability is something that we have worked with the government in Pakistan, launched Smartphone for All initiative with the Ministry of IT and Telecom. We are advocating with the government. Handset financing policy has been drafted. As a result of it, it's in cabinet for approval. So these are the policy and advocacy measures that GSMA is supporting the government with to narrow down this digital divide.
Right.
So I'll stop here and then we can talk about.
Thank you so much, Saira, for an elaborated answer. Thank you, Mons, for joining us. Before I come to the traditional banking channel, I would like to touch base upon the indicators that Saira have talked about. The availability and the relevance of the digital tools. And when we talk about it, your product actually, pop up in the mind that entrepreneurs and all those people who have started the business but they were thinking how to start and where to start, they can look up to at least one platform where this. I would like to first briefly talk about that, what is that product and how we talk about it. But more importantly, this digital gap, how do you see in entrepreneurship actually helping to reduce it and then as a result of it, increasing the financial inclusion? Over to you, Mons.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with a great group of panelists. This is a topic I think we need to talk about a lot more. So first of all, I want to sort of reduce the problem to something very simple. We talk about financial inclusion and there's a gender gap that comes with it, and the gender gap is substantial. And I think it's important to understand what is the reason for the gender gap. I mean, we can keep telling people कि इस्तेमाल करो, लेके आओ, इस्तेमाल करो, but fundamentally, हम सब के पास अभी smartphone है. Most of us have some sort of a financial instrument on our phone. How many people have a banking wallet, Easy Paisa, Jazz Cash, MCB on their smartphone? Almost all of this crowd, almost the entire crowd. And why do you have it? Because you're educated, you need it, you understand the usefulness. Nobody forced you to install it, install kare. Now, the reality of the market in Pakistan is that women have far larger obstacles than men because it's a physical world. We evolved from the caveman and now we have these things called smartphones and AI. It was a physical world. I had to take something from here to there, I had to exchange it, I had to trade it, get money, and largely we're still in a physical world. It turns out that in areas like ours, there's transportation apartheid, I'll call it, because for a woman to move around physically is much harder than for a man to move around. And there are a few reasons for that, and one reason is that the amount of money a woman spends moving from place to place is much more than a man will spend. Our boys will hop on a motorcycle with two people, they'll ride someplace. A woman will probably take an auto, a rickshaw, or they'll take a Kareem. So women often spend about 1/3 of their salary on transportation, whereas a man will spend maybe a tenth, right? And then the woman will also not have the flexibility to go to the market when she wants, because family will say, nahi, you cannot go alone, to bhai ko leke jao, ya main khud saath jaunga. And because of that, women are excluded from lots of opportunities. So ab ye jo financial inclusion ka daur hai, where all of you have smartphones now, you have a financial instrument on your smartphone, you can now buy and sell on your smartphone. You don't have to drive around. You can collect payments on your smartphone. So I'm going to say that women have much more to gain from this new wave than men do. So more and more women should adopt the platform naturally because it's in the self-interest. And I think the question is, okay, what can we do to accelerate that? And I think it's fundamentally understanding where the gaps are. And the gaps are, how do you enable a woman without having to move from place to place, be able to sell, to buy, to transact, and to get information. And clearly, we need to build more local applications. With Dukan, we've built an e-commerce platform that anybody can come on their smartphone, upload products, start to sell, the payments enter, deliveries are already integrated into this platform. So these are things that are happening because they need to happen. So I think there's a tremendous potential, and naturally more and more women are going to gravitate, but the indigenous issues we need to solve. And indigenous issues are mainly the cultural issues around giving women access to their own ID cards, for example. To allow them to go to Nadra and grab the ID card, to go to an Easy Paisa agent or Jazz Cash agent. And this is largely a societal problem. And if I was a woman today in Pakistan, I would fight very, very hard to get my smartphone and get a wallet on there and get the tools I need, because this is the great equalizer for Pakistan. Not just for this crowd, you guys are all educated, highly affluent. I'm talking about the bottom of the pyramid.
Yeah, thank you. If I come to the traditional banking side as well, and how we see the unbanked population, it is, and I emphasize again here, that women is one part, which is the larger population. But when we say unbanked population, it also includes the socio class, it also includes the persons with disabilities, right. It also includes the religious minorities, it also includes the gender minorities. So the unbanked population becomes such a huge aspect. And from traditional banking side, if we look at, and we looked at the online banking coming up, and then the mobile banking coming, and the digital financial coming, all this evolution happens, and you being the chief digital officer had been actually the forefront of these as well.
Right.
How do you see the banks actually looking at this link of digital gap versus the financial inclusion? And what are those aspects where we now need to focus on? Keeping all these challenges, what is the way forward? How can we reduce that?
Sabahat, thank you very much for having me. And Bismillah Rahman Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Pleased to have you here. Let me synthesize what my fellow panelists, and I'm the least lustrous of them all. So, Maleeha talked about how the scoring models and credit lending can be enabled for women and for underserved, unserved. Because would you know that access to finance is one of the sustainable development goals for SDGs for United Nations, and it's considered a fundamental goal there. Then Saira talked about how mobile phones, smartphones ownership will enable the revolution, and followed by Mons informed that the women as a segment and the underserved, unserved, underbanked, unbanked, they all need access to transactions, being able to do payments and go out. The good news is that this transformation started with National Database Registration Authority, NADRA, and that's a success story for our country and Pakistan, because there are close to 200 million people who are registered, and you need an identity first to be able to do anything. It's another thing, the kind of society we live in, and Mons has pointed out to that. But today there is an informed and an organized system that exists. I just looked at the data points from PTA, 130 million broadband mobile users. So, the system is getting enabled. Yes, that's true that in certain parts of our country, women cannot access their ID cards. If they want to have handheld devices, mobile phones, it's through their brothers or father or some man in the family. So those challenges need to be addressed. Now let's talk about what banking system is doing for that. This started from NFIS, National Financial Inclusion Strategy. And one of the objectives, it has 7-8 work streams, including lending and including financial literacy, including digital transformation. I happen to work for the financial literacy work stream. So there we had divided Pakistan into urban, rural, based on gender, men, women, based on educational qualifications, and there were interventions being planned. Now, let's not politicize who started it, who didn't, but those were good interventions and they are still work in progress. Those were followed up by diversity, equity, inclusion policy by State Bank of Pakistan. So regulator has been on it. So what did they do? What they did was that, by 2025, the workforce needs to have at least 25% women at workplace to ensure gender diversity. And what it meant was that there needs to be specific products developed by banking sector for women. And my fellow panelists, while we were still chatting, they said that for now we've just changed the color to pink, and we've not actually really come up with banking sector as a segment has not come up with real products. But I can tell you some real work is work in progress, and enablement is being developed. Finally, there are targets which the government continues to pursue on lending to women entrepreneurs. So Mons has already taken a leap of faith, Dukan. We at MCB are also working on a platform called Simplify. Now Simplify enables these social media pages to accept carded digital payments. And that would be a leap forward, because then hundreds of businesses in a while would be able to read something like a Shopify, and it's a store builder, it's a instant access to your page to accept payments and stuff, and you enable those cottage industry and one-person entrepreneurs to do business online and accept payments without cash on delivery, which has its risks and challenges. So net, there is a lot of work, but this all needs to come together.
Yes.
And this morning I used ChatGPT. Mons laughed it out, but it said that it all begins with understanding what your problem is. And this synthesis represents that we know where we are headed. And yes, we are headed in the right direction. But like they say, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. So we've just taken a handful of steps and we are on it.
Very good start of the discussion. Now I go in a little deeper discussion on that. We talked about the relevance, we talked about the access, and we talked about the cultural taboos. But beyond that, there is an elephant in the room, and that is cash is the king. And digital divide versus cash is the king is still going on, with a lot of people still thinking that we can continue doing the cash, and then obviously pulling the agenda towards the same way of working where a lot of people had been excluded because of that. Now, if we really want to, and the question is from each one of you in that area, that so Dukan created a kind of relevant product for them. Banks created the relevance through the policies and the product. GSMA is pointing out the data. And globally, this scenario is coming in. Where is the gap? What is not happening that needs to happen so that everything can stitch together?
Well, thank you. I think this is really an elephant in the room, and thank you for raising it, that why is still cash a major, especially in emerging economies like ours, why is still it's a cash-based economy. And well, according to a World Bank estimate, 15% of the Pakistan economy is cash-based. And I was presenting that somewhere at a presentation with banks, local banks and institutions, and they laughed. They said it's not 15%, it's way more than that. So I think I'm just validating what you're saying. Let me just step away and think about what was just said, also very nicely summarized and said. So there are cultural things, yes. And then there is regulatory. I think I really appreciate Shahzad saying the positive aspect is that regulatory steps have been taken to create the incentives for banks and lending institutions and for financial inclusion. But the problem is that it's a lot of lip service. And I'm sorry if this is not a very popular thing to say, but it is the truth. How many of us have actually approached for financial services, and for me as an individual, and I'm not talking as a bank, as an individual, and I'm not talking as a woman. When I go to a bank, what do I want the most? Usually a loan of some sort, right? Wrap it up in whatever way you want to do, whether it's an educational loan or a personal or a home loan. We don't have access to credit by and large. What happens is that we don't have access to credit, we don't have a lot of services that we need. So what do? We start relying on our own services, on our own savings, and we create communities where we can lend and borrow informally. So there's a huge informal sector where credit and cash is king, because the credits, by credit I mean not banking credit, but local credit and informal credit is king. So there is a huge, let's recognize that sector today. If we want to address, like I think earlier Mons said that we have to recognize a problem and then we address it. And why are people like Mons and other fintechs doing well is because there's that space. So there is a huge cash-based economy, there is informal credit. So the fintechs and let's say the challengers came into that space and started servicing that sector because there was a demand and a need. One of the people, and I want to highlight this, one of the areas which are highly neglected, although again I will confirm what Shahzad said, is that there is a need and there is a will to do something about it in the regulatory space, is the SME sector, when we talk about small businesses. So what happens for a typical SME is that they do not get, for instance, if how many of us have been to Sialkot? We all know about Sialkot, right? How well they're doing, they're exporting. When I went to the Sialkot Chamber of Commerce, one of the main things they told us was कि हमें credit नहीं मिलता. Yeah, believe करेंगे that their football is, in the World Cup, and they actually have export instruments, surgical instruments to the world. They're the best quality. Why? Because they're working in clusters. They're actually an amazing model where they're not large corporations working there. They're individuals and small companies, SMEs actually, in clusters that are specializing, creating international standards and then exporting their products. But are they getting import-export factoring, supply chain financing, credit? Oh, there's someone who knows and is nodding saying no. Am I right? Yeah, absolutely. So that's the reality. So going back to what Shahzad was saying, do banks want to lend to them? Yes. Do regulators want them to be there? Yes. But again, we have certain risk, we need risk mitigation interventions. For instance, in Pakistan, we don't have credit guarantee, we don't have a credit guarantee institution. We don't have a reliable credit profiling system. So banks say we cannot take excessive risk because there could be NPLs, it could affect us, right? And so these very critical, so about 80 to 90% of your economy is being driven by these SMEs who are not being given credit. And so again, let me tie it back and so of course they will deal with cash. इनको तो credit मिलता नहीं है, तो cash ही king हुआ ना उनके लिए, हाँ उनके लिए तो cash ही king हुआ, वो तो buying export भी contract base पे करेंगे. So what they are now, so what the critical part that is missing, or the gap that is missing, is we need to have these institutions, these mechanisms, and again I'll tie it back to what was said by you, Sabahat, earlier. Digital, it has to be empowered and enabled through digital means, because these profilings, these credit guarantees, these through partnership and collaborations with fintechs, accessing data that is, for instance, accounting data that is real time now on cloud, you know, and open banking legislation, which allows one fintech or financial service company to share data with another one with permission, of course. अगर मुझे बैंक पे जाना है, मैंने MCB के साथ, मैं SME हूँ, MCB के साथ काम करना है, लेकिन मैंने Mons की कंपनी के थ्रू transactions किए, I can request Mons to share my transaction data with MCB. MCB feels comfortable. They say, fine, you are a reliable, you know, a credit-worthy client. We can extend you credit. And so there are solutions out there, and we need to have the will and the collective will and the ability to execute the excellent policies and collaborate to actually say cash is no longer king.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Saira, I'll come to you then.
Thank you, Sabahat. So I would like to address it from the perspective of inclusion and access to cash. We're talking about marginalized community and rural areas, and then we talk about women specifically. In that regard, I believe that yes, we have institutions, we have we have policies, we have intent, but these people, we've talked about digital and literacy and everything, but once we cross that, these people do not have access to cash because they do not have a credit history. They are unbanked, right? So what can we do? In my opinion, the basic starting point is actually identifying, developing and scaling approaches to reach these people. Let them know that how they can access certain amount of credit and cash. Once that is done and customized as per the data and analysis, that would make a huge impact in terms of
user behavior generated profile.
Yes, exactly. So in GSMA as well, when we work with our partners, we create multiple journeys. And even if you go through our studies and research, it shows you the financial journey and the digital journey where you lose the customer most. So if you focus on that and you customize that user behavior, I think that would enable them having access to cash. And also from regulatory and policy perspective as well, one example that I want to give here is about one program that we started with KissPay on smartphone for all, because enabling people digitally and then financially was giving handsets to these men and women on installments. Their phone history was used as their credit history. Their behavior of paying back and topping up their phone was used to loan them the handsets on easy installments, making them financially included by letting them know that they can pay via Jazz Cash or any digital wallet, Jazz Cash, Easy Paisa, or any other digital wallet. So that was a step towards letting them know, digitally enabling them on small installments, and then asking them to pay back, getting them into that formal economy so that when they apply for loan next time, they have some credit history. So that is one of the example, and I'm thanks to Mimi that she mentioned the informal economy. That is women, you know, when they're managing the household, it's more common in women, and in locally we call it committee, right? So I am one of them as well, and when my tax consultant files my tax return, so he sends me this Excel sheet, and madam aap isme fill kar dein ki ye kahan aa rahi hai, kahan ja rahi hai. And when the first time I did it, I was like, what should I write? Committee? I mean, like, you're filing your tax returns, and you know, and this is a huge amount, and I mean, everyone, but this is something which also, you know, needs to find some ways, because women actually are handling cash more in this way.
So, Mons, are you bringing the committee product? Let me ask you directly about it.
We are
नहीं,
not even recognizing it, तो फिर product
No, I agree, spot on. I think there are three things.
Yeah.
There are three trends which we've spoken about here. And तो ये होगा. I mean, अगर हम ना कुछ करें ना, ये वैसे होना है because हवा चल रही है and all of these things are starting to get interconnected. We are accelerating it, you are accelerating it.
Yeah.
But there are three things that are super encouraging. पहली चीज़ ये है कि digital transactions are increasing rapidly in our economy and cash is going down. Cash still dominates. It will for a long time, maybe forever. But this is the first year that the number of ATM cash withdrawals is less than the number of digital transactions. The paper usage is definitely going down. Very encouraging trend. Ye ho raha hai. It's going to keep accelerating. The other thing that Mimi was talking about, it's actually very nuanced. It's spot on. What is not happening? ठीक है, smartphones भी आ गए, wallets भी आ गए, we've got payments, great initiatives हो रहे हैं. What's not happening is that ये जितने भी data sets हैं हमारे, data applications हैं, कुछ data मेरे पास है, कुछ data शहजाद के पास है, कुछ data मीमी के पास है. They don't talk to each other. They're in isolated silos, and not only are they in isolated silos, they're on different softwares. One was built in 1980, something is new. उनको जोड़ना इतने पैसे लगते हैं. You have to get the permissions. मैं कहूँगा मैंने नहीं देना data. आप कहेंगे आपने नहीं देना. मेरा तो अपना data है, तो मेरा फ़ायदा नहीं हो रहा. And because of this, this digital economy never takes off because you have the friction points in between. So with Dukan, the philosophy was enabled MSME lending. So Dukan is actually a platform that produces proxies for data that allows us to lend. So we've, one of the partnerships we've done is with Easy Paisa. Unke 3 lakh retailers jo hain, we've given them a super app. Dukan has powered a super app for Easy Paisa. उसके अंदर हमने क्या किया है? उसके अंदर हमने उनके distributors को जोड़ दिए हैं. जो supplies खरीदते हैं, उस app के अंदर से करते हैं. Distributors को हमने software दिया हुआ है. अपना software that interconnects. They are now able to collect payments from their wallet to their wallet. They're able to buy. They are able to manage the delivery staff, inventory. सारा interconnect कर दिया है ecosystem. Retailer को we're handing them the QR codes and sound boxes. तो अब RAS भी आ गया है. Cash is coming into the digital economy through these QR codes now. क्योंकि cash अंदर आ गया, अब वो cash spend आगे कर सकते हैं. और वो use cases मैंने इसके साथ ही जोड़ दिए seamlessly. Now they're spending money on things that they buy. When they spend money on things that they buy, sometimes they don't have cash and they need credit. Because we're very bad as a financial industry in giving credit to MSMEs. वो छोटे छोटे होते हैं, उनको score करना अजाब होता है. How can I score you? You don't have bank account. मतलब I don't have your details. You don't have a house. How can I grab your house papers if I want to give you a loan? But जब ये सारा data interconnect हो जाता है, I have such good footprints and I can easily tell कि यार 50,000 का loan आप आराम से ले लेंगे. You'll repay it. और ख़ास तौर पे अगर आपको लोन देता हूँ to buy something that I know you've been selling for the past 3 years and you have a margin on it of 10%, अगर मैं आपको लोन दूंगा आप क्यों नहीं वापस करेंगे मुझे? Of course करेंगे.
Absolutely.
Because you're making money on my money.
Of course.
And now the thing is, we have to go and think where we are today and where we were in the past. We started off with the concept of a bank, a concept of a bank branch, a concept of doing transactions, going to a table, speaking to your banker and saying, मुझे loan चाहिए, वो कह रहा है अच्छा आप मुझे ये बताएं, वो बताएं, hand all the papers. But आज के दिन में, the idea of a traditional bank and a bank branch is really absurd if you think about it. I have to travel half an hour to go to a building in which I give you my money and you ask me 10 questions, I have to wait in line to give you my money. Then when I need my money, I have to go back to you and you're closed right now, आप नहीं दे सकते. या you say आप मुझे ये भी दें, ये भी दें, ये भी. It's my money. So the friction involved by having to put my money in a physical location in this day and age is actually an absurd concept. And I think what's very clear where everything is going is that banking services need to be embedded in my natural workflow. If I'm buying something, उस वक्त I need my bank to give me a loan. In the middle of that transaction, not कि बैंक जाऊँ या मुझे loan चाहिए, loan approve हो गया, transfer the money, now I go and buy something. So this concept of embedded finance is what banks are now starting to do, what the fintechs are doing, और हम सब सीख गए. तो हम सब आपस में जोड़ रहे हैं. Today, I can go and talk to almost any bank. If I give them a good value proposition, even though I'm a fintech, I'm a nobody, banks will be eager because banks are also very aware that they need to interconnect. So this is the second very good trend that you're seeing. On Dukan now, we've connected distributors, Unilever, PTC, transactions in-app ho rahe hain, loans aa rahe hain, they're going, we're doing about 300-400 loans a day from these stores we've never met based on data. They're repaying it through digitally, and we're doing a disbursement. My cost has gone down, the KYC cost. So ye economy ud jati hai. Aakhri point, sorry. All of this is happening. We're doing it. A lot of people are doing it. We're starting to interconnect. So interconnecting the ecosystem. Aakhri cheez hai that we haven't talked about much and we've been talking is artificial intelligence, AI. How many of you have used Chat GPT? Rahat? Everybody. 2 saal ho gaye. It's day zero. It's day zero, and it's improving. And there's so many things we can do. Now, the biggest problem is that you have some data, I have some data, they have some data. हमने उसको आपस में जोड़ना है. आपका जो name field है, वो मेरा ये है आपका. I have to correlate them. The beauty of AI is now it is intelligent enough to automatically map. I don't need a human being to say, yaar, ye hai. I can now throw unstructured data at it and allow it to make logical conclusions that previously required a human being. Which means that ये जो ecosystem हम जोड़ रहे हैं, हम ज़्यादा speed से जोड़ सकते हैं.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It's a very good explanation of how it all is happening. Shahzad, I'll come to you. And I come to you in the last because of 2 reasons. You have seen and done 2 major, or probably more, but 2 major areas where you pointed out the digital transformation model that you talked about, and now the simplify as well. And what I am seeing in this trend is that banks are also opening up to the ecosystem altogether. How do you see that trend helping closing the gap that we're talking about?
Thank you very much once again. So, with all respect to Mons, there's certain points where there's a confluence of our ideas, and there are others where they conflict with each other. So, Mons, back in 2001, when Lou Gerstner wrote "Who Says Elephants Can Dance," so I read that, and I read it a few times. So, wait for banks to come. You know what? I love these apps and fintechs and all that. A nephew of mine called me a few days back. His 10,000 rupees had been stuck in one of the electronic money institutions, and it wasn't heading anywhere for 2 months. In our case, a customer comes and bangs the head of a branch manager, give my money back. So the trust equation. So that needs to work out. But I'm absolutely convinced that the way forward is a shared ecosystem where everybody works with everybody. And yes, we are telling, I'm telling our financial institution, if we are not contextual, a customer's life, their situation, their events, we are not relevant, their income situation, their financial position, and if we are not seamless, we will die. I'm reminded of what Bill Gates said back in 2009, banking is necessary, banks are not. So yes, the banks of today are aware of that. So what does transformation mean to us? What it means to us is, to Mons's point, not needing to come to a bank branch, 24/7, 365 access to finance, offering services digitally. Not us, but I know quite a few banks who are today initiating 5 minutes loans. I also know in the outside world where I used to live, it was a country called Hungary. So back in 2009, at the peak of financial crisis, that country's central bank called the top 5 banks of that country, top 5 technology companies and top 5 telecommunication companies. So they sat 15 of us down and they said, we want you to have a shared ecosystem for digital transformation. Don't compete on putting up your siloed financial digital systems. Create one ecosystem and compete in the marketplace. And that's what we are propagating across Pakistan Banks Association and other entities. They're visionary CEOs and presidents who are signed on to it. Others still need to be signed on. My system, my data, my warehouse, my artificial intelligence capability, we won't open up. So there was a company that I used to work for before MCB. We had procured an open platform, open banking platform that could connect 100 APIs with the marketplace. So I'm absolutely convinced there are financial institutions who have the foresight and the insight to move forward and work with this ecosystem players, whether that's GSMA or knowledge consultants like Mimi, or even Mons's Dukan and other initiatives. And yes, we also have a payment aggregator model. What is payment aggregator? So just like he's empowering through super app We are empowering through aggregators, the telecommunication companies, and some other internet, portals. You can set up your own micro merchants, and we empower you that. So spreading the wings, more and more ecosystem players stepping into creating what we call one shared whole.
Yeah.
And this nation really needs this thinking, and this audience needs that thinking, that if we want to go far, we've got to go together.
Thank you so very much. If I conclude, thank you so much. We're going a little ahead of time. Just want to conclude now. If I ask just one thing that you, and I know it's a tall ask, but one thing that you think absolutely necessary to close the gap. We'll conclude our discussion on that one thing that you think is the must to happen to close the gap between the digital divide that we have and the financial inclusion to happen. Mimi.
So for me, it is, I think what was being said, definite collaboration between technology and financial institutions, and of course creation of access to internet, and उसमें जितना भी काम किया जाए, या access to digital platforms जितना भी काम किया जाए, governments, private sector, and indeed multilaterals have a role to play for this to actually happen. And just to add to what was being said, I mean, DBS famously, Piyush Gupta of DBS Singapore says that, we are a technology company with a banking license. So I think that's where the future lies.
Right, thank you. Saira?
I'll just go by what GSMA says, and right from the basic and starting digital and financial literacy skills from the for the lower bottom of the pyramid, and then of course handset affordability. It starts with that for us.
Digital revolution have to come from that. Thank you so much, Shahzad.
So I think if you look at our neighboring country, their macroeconomic reform started in 1990, and it was started by somebody who doesn't represent their current government and the incumbent government for 10 years, and they're likely to win. And since then there were 4 different governments. Nobody touched the macroeconomic reform in an adverse way. Let it happen. So we have to shun the political divide and let the macroeconomic reform of this country happen.
Yeah.
So I consider it as a bedrock of transformation.
True.
So
Thank you so much. Mons?
I think it's the same points really, but we need to allow rapid innovation to happen, and rapid innovation doesn't happen if you lock up those financial rails with 1, 2, 3 institutions that are moving slowly and have a lot of overhead from a regulatory standpoint. I didn't mean to imply that banks aren't needed. Banks are the heart of this entire ecosystem. We can't operate. A fintech isn't able to move 1 rupee from one place to the other if there isn't a bank on the background. What I was sort of referring to is a hub and spoke model. The bank is the hub, and then you have lots of little speedboats around it that go and implement those use cases. Now what we need is, the banks are doing a great job, open APIs bhi aa gaye hain, the banks are allowing us to play with their rails. This is exactly how it should be. And then what happens is that we all go and build these little speedboats. You build a committee app, aapne bana di. I build like an e-commerce app. And we have to let those plug in. And when we do that, then the sort of regulatory friction goes down because the bank is managing that. So the more we allow these sort of speedboats to be created, and you are creating new applications which are embedding financial services, people will use it because they need that use case. They will learn how to use a phone. They will buy a phone. There are lots of examples of people earning a salary of 20,000 rupees buying smartphones for 80,000 rupees. In your household, you'll see it. So I think this learning, and Uber and the Kareem, we saw that these drivers who didn't know how to use smartphones, they bought smartphones. They learned how to, navigate maps because unki aamdani aa rahi thi. Ye natural iska jo consequence hai. So we just need more speedboats.
Right. Thank you so very much. Thank you so much, esteemed panel. That's a very interesting, very deep discussion.
Thank you.
And I think panel deserves a good round of applause.
Thank you. Great audience.
Over to you, Ikra.
Let's take a selfie.
Thank you, Sabahat. Indeed, a very insightful discussion. And I would now like to invite Kawal Mashroor to give our distinguished panelist a token of appreciation, mementos. So first, I would like to invite, obviously, Sabahat, the one who conducted the panel discussion so brilliantly. The lady behind the discussion. Saira Faisal, country head GSMA. Miss Maleeha Bangash. Mr. Shahzad Ishaq, CDO MCB. And then we have Mons Rahman, co-founder and CEO, Dukan. So if we can all have you for the group photo, it would be player.